Excellency Mombotsanana Guzmão, Prime Minister of Timor-Leste, Excellency Maria Fernanda Lai, President of the National Parliament, Excellency Deputy Prime Minister Francisco Abualdo Lai, ministers and delegates from the G7 plus countries, members of the National Parliament of Timor-Leste, ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, the United Nations, representatives of the media, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning and welcome all to Dili, the birthplace of the G7+. It is with immense pleasure that I address you today at this sixth ministerial meeting of the G7+, an occasion that marks 15 years of our collective struggle, resilience, and determination. Your presence on our soil honors us and fills our homes with joy. When the G7 Plus was first established in 2010, I was serving as the second president of Timor-Leste, my first term in office. Our country had just emerged from the political instability, security crisis of 2006, a period of deep uncertainty and division. But our struggle for stability did not begin there. For 24 years, Timor-Leste endured occupation, conflict, immense hardship, leaving deep scars on our nation and people. Yet, despite this painful history, we chose a different path, not one of revenge, but of reconciliation, dialogue, national unity. The pursuit of truth and justice, combined with deliberate efforts to rebuild trust and heal divisions, allowed Timor-Leste to transition from conflict to peace and stability. Reconciliation was not merely a policy. It was a necessity for our survival as a nation. It required immense political will, courage, and above all, a collective determination to move forward rather than remain trapped by the wounds of the past. It was the vision and the leadership of Mombotsanana Guzmão that guided us to leave behind the bitterness of the past and embark on a new chapter of our destiny. Our country also gained valuable experience in managing international engagement, having hosted several United Nations missions that supported our transition to stability. However, the ultimate responsibility for our peace and stability rested in our hands. The lesson we learned is clear. National ownership of the peace process is essential for its success. That vision of peace, tolerance, and unity has shaped our national pursuit ever since. Today, Timor-Leste is a peaceful nation, an active player in multilateralism, and a firm champion of global cooperation. We became the first country to officially adopt the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together. The document, allow me to divert a bit from the formal speech to explain a bit. The document on human fraternity for world peace and living together was crafted by His Holiness Papa Francisco and the Grand Imam, Professor Tayyeb of Al-Azhar, Cairo, over a period of 1 year, leading to a world religious conference in Abu Dhabi with the presence of Papa Francisco, and the Grand Imam. Then when the document was signed in 2019, and Timor-Leste in 2022 became the first country to officially, by an act of parliament, to adopt the document on human fraternity for all peace living together as a national document, and at the same time adapting it to our national curriculum. I continue. We are active members of the CPLP, G7, WTO, and soon to become members of ASEAN. All of this was made possible because of our unwavering commitment to reconciliation, a shared vision for prosperity. These lived experiences shape our conviction that fragile states must define their own path to peace. It was no surprise then that Timor-Leste joined hands with other nations to form the G7+, challenging the status quo of international engagement in conflict-affected countries. We understood that for peace to be sustainable, it must be driven by those who have lived through war, not imposed from outside. When the G7 Plus was conceived, I witnessed firsthand the aspiration of its founding nations, nations that had endured war, fragility, and underdevelopment. They came together with a bold vision to turn their shared struggles into a platform for transformation. We understood that the international system, as it was structured, had failed to address our challenges. The Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, had left many of us behind. The international aid system remained fragmented and ineffective, and conflicts continue to devastate countries like ours while global governance mechanisms remain indifferent. It was in response to this reality that G7 Plus was born, not as another diplomatic initiative, but as a movement. A movement to ensure that conflict-affected nations would no longer be passive recipients of external decisions, but active voices shaping their own futures. It is this vision that must continue to guide us as we face the future. Today, as the G7 group reflects on the collective journey, we must acknowledge that we live in an era of profound uncertainty. The global landscape is shifting rapidly, and not always in ways that favor peace and stability. Geopolitical tensions are escalating. Climate change is no longer a theoretical risk, but an existential crisis, particularly for vulnerable states. Economic disparities continue to widen, and once again, it's the nations of the global south, our nations, that bear the brunt of this crisis. The international system that was designed to safeguard peace, prevent wars, promote mutual respect, has failed to meet these challenges. Its failure is not accidental. It was embedded in its very foundation. The world order that emerged after the Second World War was designed by a handful of powerful states, structured to serve their interests, rather than to build a just and inclusive global system. It was established under the guise of universalism, but has often operated selectively, imposing rules on some while allowing others to break them with impunity. We have long been told that the world operates under, I quote, a rules-based order, end of quote. But we must ask, whose rules? Who truly abides by them? The reality is that the global system we rely on has been driven by power, not principles. And today, as power dynamics shift, the system is failing to adapt. This moment in history presents an opportunity to correct the imbalances of the past and reimagine an international order that is truly just, inclusive, and reflective of the voices of all nations, not just the powerful few. For too long, our countries have been caught in the middle of geopolitical rivalries that had little to do with us. While much of the world, particularly the global north, reaped the benefits of peace and economic progress, our nation became the fuel for a so-called Cold War, one that was anything but cold for us. We were pressured to take sides in conflicts we did not create, and too often our lands became the battleground for these contests of hegemony. Many of our countries are still struggling to recover from the scars of that era. The legacy of the Cold War lingers in places like Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, just to name a few. And now, once again, the world finds itself entangled in a cocktail of crises, marked by deepening divisions that only serve to exacerbate global challenges. The United Nations, the last resort for our countries, remain one of the most critical platforms for shaping global governance. Yet it continues to suffer from structural imbalances. The Security Council, in particular, remains dominated by a handful of nations, some of whom yield their power to obstruct meaningful reform and uphold their own strategic interests rather than global peace. I have long been an advocate for a more inclusive and representative UN, and I'm encouraged that two of our G7 member states now serve as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. But this is not enough. We must continue to demand a seat at the table. With observer status, G7 must actively push for the Security Council and other UN bodies to be more democratic and accountable. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, over the past 15 years, the G7 has worked relentlessly to amplify the voices of conflict-affected countries, ensuring that their challenges and aspirations are recognized on the global stage. It has championed peace and stability efforts rooted in national ownership, advocating for a shift away from externally imposed solutions towards approaches that truly reflect the needs of our nation. For this, I extend my deepest appreciation to the leaders of the G7 Plus, its member states, and especially the G7 Secretariat, Dr. Elder Costa and his team, for your tireless efforts in advancing this noble cause. Your dedication has made the G7 Plus not just a coalition, but a true force for change. But there is still much work to be done. As we look ahead, let us reaffirm our commitment to three fundamental objectives. First, we must continue to collectively advocate for reforms in international institutions. The rules that govern the global order must be rewritten to ensure they are inclusive, equitable, and reflective of the realities of all nations, especially those emerging from conflict and fragility. As a unified bloc, we must scale up our efforts to negotiate the rules of engagement, ensuring that our countries are not mere recipients of decisions made elsewhere, but active participants in shaping policies that impact us directly. The G7 Plus has already demonstrated its potential by gaining access to key policy forums, where it has positioned itself as a credible voice in discussions on peace building, development cooperation, trade, climate change, food security, and beyond. We must now build on this momentum, ensuring that our advocacy translates into real, lasting reforms that empower our nation to shape their own future. Second, we must strengthen our solidarity, because that is the true strength of G7+. Solidarity is not just a principle, it is the foundation of our collective resilience. It is what has allowed us to stand together and amplify our voices. Now more than ever, the G7 Plus must step up its efforts to support member states facing active conflict. We cannot stand by while our brothers and sisters in the DRC, Yemen, Haiti, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and other nations in the global south endure unimaginable suffering. Through peer-to-peer support, knowledge sharing, and initiatives like Fragile to Fragile Cooperation, we have the power to build resilience from within. We have the experience, the wisdom, the determination to help each other overcome conflict and fragility. Third, we must promote national ownership in all aspects of peace and development. Sustainable progress can only be achieved when it is led by those who understand their own challenges best: our governments, our communities, our people. International support must align with national priorities, not dictate them. Let me highlight a platform that speaks directly to the priorities of this room: the Global Task Force on Social Protection for Nutrition, co-chaired by Timor-Leste and Chile, with the World Food Programme serving as its secretariat and backed by G7+. The GTF responds to a specific gap in the international architecture. While many platforms work on social protection, few place nutrition at the center, and even fewer respond directly to the unique challenges faced by the least and landlocked developed countries, LDCs, and fragile states. The GTF reframes the narrative. Fragile and least developed countries are not just support recipients. They are knowledge producers, policy leaders, and drivers of innovation, from school feeding and digital registries to maternal cash transfers and community-led targeting. At a time when global solidarity is fragile, the GTF is building bridges between local realities and global commitments, between technical innovation and political leadership, and between countries that are too often left behind and the policies meant to serve them. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, our work ahead is far from over, which demands even greater courage, persistence, and vision. We must not settle for the status quo. We must not allow ourselves to be marginalized in global decision-making. We must see this moment to shape a new narrative, one in which our nations are recognized not as problems to be solved, but as partners in building a more just and peaceful world. I wish you all meaningful and productive discussions over the next 2 days. I hope that The organizers have reserved enough time for our visitors to have some quality time in visiting our city and les arrondissements, the areas around Delhi. May your deliberation be constructive and impactful. Enjoy your stay in Delhi. Thank you, merci, and God bless us all.